Hello everyone, my name is Steven and I am a Navy intelligence veteran and current MSU student. The analyst I chose to interview was from the Detroit Police Force. I chose this for two reasons. First, I knew him, so I knew he would respond to my communications. That is a huge bonus. The second reason is that Detroit is fascinating for a lot of reasons. Mainly, even though it is a local police force, Detroit in a way has an international border. Canada is a stone throw away across the Detroit River. For those of you who aren't familiar with the area, that picture there is what they call the Ambassador Bridge. It links Michigan to Canada. The first thing I wanted to do was determine what kinds of strategies and philosophies Detroit employs. We learned a lot of various different strategies in our class from POPs and COPs and various other models. The analyst mentioned that Detroit uses different strategies for different problems. For neighborhood outreach, it makes use of problem-oriented policing. It uses SARA and POP for dealing with gangs. Specifics are having officers just dedicated to overseeing gangs and studying them and engaging in tactics that will reduce gang crime. Some of these are more stops in areas that are known to be gang areas, identifying individuals who may wish to join gangs and preventing them. Another project mentioned is Project Green Light. This is Green Light specifically deals with areas that are high in crime and frequent in travel. In the Little Black Book of Violence, these are referred to as fringe areas, often ripe grounds for certain types of assaults and robberies. The one that comes to mind, I think, to everybody, obviously, is violence that surrounds truck stops and parking structures and the like. Detroit, like any other department, is going to have its share of challenges. Information sharing is the greatest challenge for some departments. This can take many forms. Detroit has many stations and a lot of personnel. Making sure everything is cataloged and gets to the right people can be very difficult. Even when the process is streamlined, there are cultural factors to consider. Traditionally, law enforcement officers have been socialized to keep things very close to their chest. This has some advantages. Witnesses obviously need to be protected. Information needs to be prevented from being leaked. Of course, the mentality backfires. There are also some issues involving rivalry with federal institutions in relation to local institutions. Sometimes either party may be apathetic to the other party's desire to close a case. It is not always checked to see if they have pertinent information that can help the other authorities. The 21st century brings with it a series of challenges. There are so many ways to get data, but that does not necessarily mean that the data is being analyzed by the right people. There are also issues concerning clearances. Detroit is getting better technology that includes things like license plate recognition and facial recognition. Recently, facial recognition came under scrutiny. That's a link right there. I'll try to put that into the description. Many civil rights groups take issue with money, especially if it is grants from the federal government being spent exclusively on technology. Some people in the community feel that money would be better spent on just hiring more personnel. Invasive technologies or technologies perceived to be invasive are a major issue with no clear-cut answer, because the technologies are actually making the officers there much more efficient, and so you need less of them if you have the right tech. There's no one-size-fits-all answer to that question. It's very hard to determine. Okay, so obviously we have to talk about terrorism, because that's a huge issue in law enforcement, even if terrorism isn't very prevalent. The likelihood of Detroit being a target of terrorism is very low. This is due to the fact that Detroit's main industry is the auto industry, and the big three companies don't have the pull they used to have. In the past, if someone shut down Detroit, yes, they could grind the auto industry to a halt, but many auto industries these days are not headquartered in Detroit. Terrorists, generally speaking, have sort of three things they consider when they're doing an attack. They want something that's going to have a high cost of life, cause a huge financial impact, and emotional symbology. There's not a lot of targets in Detroit that have that criteria anymore. The big three, the fact is they have, their own security teams and threat analyst teams, so an attack on them would both be difficult to pull off, and it just wouldn't have the impact that it would, say, 60 years ago. There's also, too, a huge Arab American and Muslim community here in Michigan. I think that would backfire as, especially if it's Islamic fundamentalists, because they can read cultural nuance. A lot of cleared personnel is recruited by the government from Michigan. So very difficult to pull off also in that sense. But it's not impossible. If they were going to pick a target, the target that would probably have the most impact in all three vectors would be the Ambassador Bridge. Millions of dollars in cargo comes across that Ambassador Bridge, and if it shut down the tunnel that also links Detroit to Canada, that can't fit commercial vehicles, a lot of them. They do threat analysis on the bridge, and there are other agencies, federal agencies, that secure the bridge as well. But let's say it's not impossible. You should never think anything is impossible. Another issue with terrorism is high volume events. These would be baseball games, concerts, areas where there's going to be a lot of people packed into a small area. Even if not for terrorism, these events can still be hotspots for crime. So, they monitor a lot of social media posts, stuff like that. People who say they want to commit violence down at, say, Ford Field where the Lions play, or something like that. Detroit is getting it right. The initiatives have been successful in some cases. I mean, just look at the graph off to that side. The lessons that people can learn from Detroit are this. Do not fight crime, prevent it. If you are not preventing crime, you're on the defensive all the time. That is a losing battle. The technologies are effective even as their use is controversial. Work with the community. Traditional law enforcement methods are okay some of the time, but there are times when analysis and prevention